Picture the scene. Vienna, Christmas Eve, 1634. The Hofburg Palace is cloaked in silence, except for the tolling of midnight bells and the muffled shuffle of servants moving across frozen corridors. Outside, snow drifts against the iron gates, where eagles of the Habsburg dynasty sit carved in stone, their wings stiff with frost. Inside, the air is thick with incense, candle wax, and the sharp tang of iron that betrays what has just happened in the bedchamber. A young woman has given birth, and the crimson stains on silk sheets mark the cost of continuing Europe's most dangerous dynasty. In the hands of the midwife lies a newborn girl, her face ruddy from the struggle of entering the world. To the courtiers assembled, she is simply another princess in a line of many, but history will remember her as Mariana of Austria, the most inbred queen in European history. Her blood is a labyrinth of ancestral entanglement, a knot tied so tightly by centuries of marriages between uncles, nieces and cousins, that it already carried the seeds of disaster. Her father, Ferdinand III, would become Holy Roman Emperor. Her mother, Mariana of Spain, was both his cousin and his niece, through overlapping branches of the family tree. The child who now drew her first breath was therefore the product of generations of deliberate entanglement, designed to preserve power, territory, and the illusion of divine legitimacy. The doctors and priests present whispered prayers of thanksgiving, yet even then, the features of the child hinted at the dynasty's curse. The jaw slightly too heavy for an infant, the lips soft but already shaped in that familiar protrusion, the unmistakable Habsburg jaw. This was no ordinary birth. It was the continuation of an experiment in human bloodlines unparalleled in European history. To understand Mariana's destiny, one must understand the arithmetic of incest that had become policy in the House of Austria. For 3 centuries, the Habsburgs had pursued an obsession: keep their empire intact by refusing to dilute it with foreign blood. While other dynasties looked outward for alliances, the Habsburgs turned inward. They wed their nieces, their cousins, their uncles, repeating the same combinations until the family tree resembled not a tree but a closed circle, choking itself. Each generation overlapped with the previous one, tightening the genetic noose. Philip II of Spain had married his own niece, Anna of Austria. Their son Philip III then married his cousin, Margaret of Austria, and in turn, Philip III would take Mariana, his niece, this infant just delivered, as his future wife. The pattern was not accident but strategy, and yet the cost was visible in the bodies of their children, fragile, short-lived, and often malformed. For the moment, none of this mattered. The midwife held the infant up for all to see, and the courtiers bowed. To them, the child's presence was proof of divine favor, a reinforcement of the dynasty's claim over Europe. But to the modern eye, those same features, painted over in flattering oils by court artists, read as signs of degeneration: the elongated skulls, the drooping eyes, the slack muscles, the infertility. Even in the candle-lit chamber of her birth, Mariana embodied this contradiction, the triumph of dynastic continuity, and the silent warning of biological collapse. As Mariana grew in the nurseries of Vienna, she was surrounded not only by the trappings of empire, but also by the silent ghosts of siblings and cousins who had not survived infancy. Infant mortality was common across Europe, but in the Habsburg nurseries it was particularly cruel. Too many children were born weak, with hydrocephalic skulls, twisted spines or frail constitutions that succumbed before their first birthday. These deaths were politely recorded as natural causes, or God's will, but in truth they were the legacy of genetics pushed to the breaking point. Each premature burial was another entry in the unpaid bill that centuries of consanguineous unions had accumulated. Mariana herself seemed healthy by comparison, though observers noted a complexion that was unusually pale, and a face that bore, even in youth, the shadow of the Habsburg physiognomy. The protruding jaw, the heavy eyelids, the receding chin that no painter could disguise entirely. Such traits were celebrated at the time, reframed as signs of noble blood, but physicians of later centuries would interpret them as markers of mandibular prognathism and developmental anomalies, the results of too many generations of genetic overlap. Her childhood was not one of play but of preparation. In the grand halls of the Hofburg Palace, vast maps of Europe were spread on oak tables, and the marriages of children like Mariana were discussed with the cold precision of military campaigns. She was never treated as simply a girl. She was a political resource, her womb the future battlefield of empires. The courtiers around her whispered constantly of alliances, inheritances, and territories. To them her face was not a child's but a signature on a contract not yet signed. Already, her fate was sealed. Before she could walk, her betrothal to her uncle, Philip IV of Spain, had been negotiated. She was to cross the Alps not as a bride of choice, but as the cement of a dynasty that no longer trusted the outside world. Spain and Austria would remain bound through her veins, even if it meant sacrificing her own health and the health of her future children. In the 17th century, the Habsburg strategy seemed flawless on paper. By keeping their bloodline pure, they believed they were keeping their empire pure, unbroken, indivisible, sanctified. But what they saw as strength was in reality weakness masquerading as piety. Contemporary portraits from Mariana's early years show this illusion in action. Painted by court artists with gold leaf and careful brushstrokes, her pale face was depicted with an almost ethereal glow, her heavy jaw softened, her lips adjusted to appear delicate rather than slack. These images circulated across European courts as propaganda, affirming the dynasty's legitimacy. But hidden beneath the paint was the truth. The very blood that made her a Habsburg was also the poison eroding the dynasty from within. Modern genetic studies have estimated the inbreeding coefficient of the Spanish Habsburgs to have been higher than in many small isolated villages. Where ordinary Europeans of the 17th century had parents with virtually no shared ancestry, the Spanish Habsburgs had parents who were often as close as uncle and niece. The consequences were devastating, not only the physical malformations visible in portraits, but also reduced fertility, miscarriages, and the tragic spectacle of heirs who died in infancy. Mariana's own bloodline was one of the tightest knots in this genetic tangle. She carried in her veins not just the heritage of a powerful empire, but the accumulated consequences of centuries of incestuous calculation. She would pass this legacy on to her son, Charles II, whose twisted body and tortured reign would mark the biological terminus of Spanish Habsburg power. But that was still decades away. For now she remained a child in Vienna, learning languages, etiquette, and the art of silence. Her life would soon be uprooted and transplanted into the rigid ceremonial labyrinth of Madrid. There, the price of her blood would become all too clear. By the time Mariana turned 15, the machinery of dynastic politics had already determined her role. She was to leave Austria for Spain, a journey that would not only separate her from her family, but also sever her from the freer Germanic traditions of Vienna. In their place, she would inherit the suffocating rituals of the Spanish court, where queens were less women than relics, preserved behind layers of protocol. The courtiers who prepared her for this role emphasized obedience, chastity, and devotion. But beneath the surface, everyone knew the real test was not moral but biological. Could she produce heirs strong enough to carry Spain into another century? Or would her children, like so many of her cousins, emerge already marked by the curse of inbreeding? The snow continued to fall over Vienna in those final years of her childhood. Each flake melted against the cold stone of the Hofburg, indifferent to the drama within. The city had seen centuries of rulers born and die within its walls. But with Mariana's birth, history had been nudged toward its inevitable reckoning. She was both the product and the prisoner of a dynasty too blind to see that its greatest strength, its obsessive unity, was also the weapon that would destroy it. Vienna, 1649. Before the high altar stands a girl of 15, dressed in silver brocade, so heavy it drags on the stone floor. This is Mariana of Austria, now old enough to fulfill the purpose for which she was born. Yet the man she is marrying, her uncle Philip IV of Spain, is not even present. Instead, a Spanish ambassador speaks his vows by proxy, binding the girl to a husband nearly 3 decades older than her. The ceremony is theatrical, but the bond is real, as unyielding as iron shackles. Mariana bows her head and repeats words she has memorized, but may not fully comprehend. Courtiers murmur about the brilliance of the match. Austria and Spain united once again, the dynastic circle closed even tighter. But in the shadows of the cathedral, you cannot help but see something more ominous. The knot of blood grows tauter with every generation, and each vow sworn today twists the family vine further until it threatens to strangle itself. For Mariana, the marriage is the beginning of a journey that will transform her life. Carriages creak under the weight of trunks and dowries as she departs Vienna. The road to Madrid is long and merciless, winding across the Alps like a funeral procession in disguise. The girl, barely past childhood, watches mountains give way to plains, then plains to the parched landscape of Castile. Ahead lies a court so rigid in its ceremonies that queens are treated less as wives than as sacred relics. When she reaches Spanish soil, the last of her Austrian servants are dismissed. Their place is taken by strangers, who bow deeply but watch her with cold, appraising eyes. To them she is not Mariana, the girl, she is the queen, a vessel into which the hopes of Spain are poured. And yet, even in the first weeks, the whispers begin. The Spanish nobility remember the frailty of Philip's earlier heirs, the infants who gasped once and died, the children who grew sickly and faded away. They study Mariana's face for signs, the pale skin, the soft jaw, the heavy lids. They tell themselves these are marks of nobility. But deep down, everyone knows what they mean. The marriage to Philip is staged with grandeur. Fountains gush with wine, roses hang in arches across the streets of Madrid, and entire villages bankrupt themselves to celebrate the arrival of their queen. The king himself appears in robes of gold and crimson, though the brilliance of his garments cannot conceal his age or exhaustion. He is 44, weary from war, and hollowed by grief from the deaths of children who never reached adulthood. At his side, Mariana looks almost spectral, her silver gown catching candlelight like a blade. She is both niece and bride, both daughter of Austria and Queen of Spain. Beside her stands Maria Theresa, Philip's daughter from his first marriage, barely younger than Mariana herself. The irony is brutal, a stepmother who is essentially a peer, but no one dares laugh. The stakes are far too high. In the Spanish court, etiquette is suffocating. Where Vienna allowed laughter and movement, Madrid imposes silence and stillness. Queens are confined to ceremonial amber, displayed but untouchable, every step choreographed, every word measured, even prayers are supervised by confessors chosen by the king. Mariana learns quickly that adaptation is survival. She learns to bow at the exact angle, to smile at the precise moment, to mask fear with serenity. Her body may be fragile, her jaw heavy, her complexion pale, but her mind sharpens because to falter in this labyrinth is to be devoured. The true test of her reign comes not in the throne room but in the nursery. Spain needs a son. Europe watches her womb as closely as generals watch the front lines. Her first child, Margaret Theresa, born in 1651, is hailed as a small miracle. She survives, grows, and will one day marry Mariana's own brother. To the Spanish court, this is success. To us, it is a chilling omen. Every cradle becomes another turn of the screw in the Habsburg spiral. But the triumph does not last. In 1655, another daughter, Maria Ambrosia, is born only to die within months. Official accounts veil the truth in phrases like natural frailty, but the reality is clear. The child bore the visible burden of her ancestry. Whispers spread of deformities too delicate to record openly, of features that marked her from the start as a victim of her family's obsession. Then comes Philip Prospero, in 1657, a boy, a prince, the answer to desperate prayers. For 4 brief years, hope radiates across Spain. Court painters depict him as an image of health, his portraits glowing with legitimacy. But when he dies in 1661, hope is buried with him. The dynasty's gamble has failed yet again. The funeral procession winds through Madrid, crowds lining the streets in silence as the tiny coffin passes. Each citizen knows what the priests will not say. The bloodline itself is collapsing. Another son, Ferdinand Thomas, is born in 1658 and dies within a year. Once more, silence cloaks the truth, but everyone understands the pattern. These children are not just victims of chance. They are the arithmetic of centuries, the biological bill presented in miniature coffins. Each tiny burial undermines the myth of divine favor and whispers instead of genetic doom. And then, 1661, a new son arrives. He lives. He is christened Charles. Court physicians murmur that survival itself is a miracle, but the child is no ordinary infant. Even in the cradle, his body seems twisted, his development delayed, his jaw protruding too heavily for his small face. Nurses and confessors surround him with relics and charms, as though warding off a curse. They call him blessed. Others whisper that he is bewitched. Posterity will know him as Charles II, El Hechizado, the bewitched, the most inbred monarch in European history. Cycle has come full circle. The girl born in Vienna, herself a product of incestuous calculation, has given Spain an heir, who embodies 3 centuries of genetic debt. His survival is less triumph than omen, for in him, the dynasty has created both its continuance and its ruin. For Mariana, the cost is not only biological but personal. She has lost children to the grave, endured pregnancies that ended in tears, and faced the unbearable weight of public expectation. Yet she does not crumble. Draped in silks and pearls, she continues to play her role, even as her body is pushed to its limits. Her jaw tightens, her features age before their time, but her will grows stronger. Still, shadows gather. Every pregnancy that ends in death, every funeral procession through Madrid, every whispered rumor about the fragility of royal blood, it all adds to the pressure upon her. The Spanish Empire may stretch across oceans, but its survival now rests on the crooked shoulders of a boy whose body already betrays him. The courtiers still toast divine providence, but you, standing in the shadows, know the truth. What they call purity is decay. What they call legitimacy is weakness. The dynasty believes it is preserving itself, but in reality it is sculpting its own tomb. And Mariana, once the girl in silver brocade, is now trapped at the very center of this slow-motion catastrophe. 1665. The Alcazar of Madrid stands silent under heavy skies, its towers rising like watchmen over a city burdened by defeat and debt. Inside, the King of Spain, Philip IV, breathes his last. Candles flicker in the royal chamber as priests murmur the litany of the dying. At his bedside stands a woman, clothed in black silk, her face pale but unyielding. This is Mariana of Austria, only 31 years old, now widow, now regent, and the guardian of a fragile child who must carry the weight of an empire. Her son Charles is 4 years old. He is small, sickly, and already marked by the family curse. His jaw protrudes, his tongue struggles to form words, his limbs seem weak, and his growth stunted. Some whisper that he was born less heir than omen, his twisted body the visible bill for centuries of incest. The dynasty has produced not a savior, but a warning. Yet appearances deceive, for while Charles lies in the nursery, trembling under the weight of prayers, it is Mariana who steps into the throne room. Draped in black silk, veiled in mourning, she becomes the regent of the largest empire on earth. Spain, whose dominions stretch from Madrid to Mexico, from Naples to Manila. In that moment, the girl once seen as a pawn becomes the most powerful woman in Europe. The Council of State meets under shafts of sunlight, breaking through stained glass, illuminating dust that hangs like golden fog. Grey-bearded grandees bow, but not without resentment. They see her as foreign, as Austrian, as female, an unnatural aberration in a kingdom that mistrusts women's rule. Yet by law and by blood, her authority cannot be denied. She signs decrees, appoints ministers, and assumes the burden of defending an empire already in decline. Her first act shocks the court. She elevates her confessor, Juan Everardo Nithard, a Jesuit of Austrian birth, to the role of chief minister. Meanwhile, beyond palace walls, the empire bleeds. France, under Louis XIV, presses claims to Spanish territory in the Low Countries. Portugal, long in rebellion, claws its way to independence. And above all hangs the question of succession. Can Charles, this weak and twisted boy, ever truly rule? Mariana proves resilient. She negotiates treaties, arranges loans, and maintains the fiction of Spanish grandeur, even as the empire crumbles beneath her. She writes letters to her brother, Leopold I of Austria, coordinating strategies against France, but danger grows from within. Don Juan of Austria the Younger, Philip IV's illegitimate son, rises as her rival. Born in Spain, military commander, and male, he embodies everything the grandees wish for in leadership. Where Mariana represents foreign control, Don Juan embodies Spanish pride. He whispers that Spain suffers because it is ruled by a woman, and worse, by an Austrian woman. Crowds in Madrid begin to chant his name. Down with the Austrian, they cry, their voices echoing like war drums through the Plaza Mayor. The palace becomes a chessboard. Every appointment Mariana makes signals loyalty. Every dismissal breeds new enemies. She learns to smile while calculating, to speak in layers of diplomatic code, to cloak threats in maternal devotion. But no mask can erase the truth. Her son, the living symbol of Spain's future, grows weaker each year. By the late 1660s, the whispers about Charles become impossible to suppress. Reports circulate that he cannot walk without help, that his tongue is too large for his mouth, that his teeth fail to align. His jaw juts forward grotesquely, the Habsburg jaw taken to its final and most extreme form. He suffers seizures, stomach illnesses, and developmental delays. Courtiers bow and call him blessed, but in their eyes flickers the recognition that he is cursed. Public appearance of her son becomes a silent reminder of fragility. Crowds cheer him as king, yet their cheers carry an undertone of pity. Her political battles intensify. In 1669, pressure against her mounts. Don Juan of Austria marshals support not only among nobles, but within the church itself. Bishops declare that Nithard's influence is unholy, that foreign advisors poison Spain's soul. Crowds gather in the streets, shouting for the Queen Mother's downfall. Faced with the risk of civil war, Mariana sacrifices her confessor. Nithard is dismissed and escorted from Madrid, in a carriage that rolls out of the capital under the gaze of mocking crowds. His departure is a public humiliation for Mariana, a victory for Don Juan. Yet she endures. She replaces Nithard with Fernando de Valenzuela, a Spanish noble loyal to her. The game continues, each move a balancing act between survival and authority. For the rest of the 1670s, Madrid becomes a city under siege from within, guards loyal to Mariana, eye those loyal to Don Juan with suspicion. Rumors of assassination swirl, food tasters multiply. The palace corridors echo with conspiracies. Mariana sharpens her skills further, mastering the art of survival. She plays the part of grieving widow, maternal guardian, and iron-willed ruler all at once. But the question that no decree can silence grows louder. What of Charles? He survives. Yes, but survival is not the same as strength. He grows into adolescence with the body of a broken child, his features grotesquely exaggerated, his health precarious. He is a boy king already half a corpse, a monarch whose body is a battlefield of collapsed genes, and everyone knows that the empire's fate depends on him alone. In 1677, Don Juan marches on Madrid at the head of an army. The city trembles. For a moment it seems Spain will collapse into civil war. Mariana, recognizing the futility of resistance, withdraws to Toledo, a tactical retreat that spares bloodshed, but marks another humiliation. Don Juan becomes chief minister, and the Queen Mother appears defeated. Yet fortune has its own designs. 2 years later, Don Juan dies suddenly, whether of illness or poison, no one knows. What matters is that Mariana, patient and enduring, survives him. She returns to Madrid in black silk, veiled as always, a woman who has outlasted every rival. Still, victory tastes of ash. For each day she holds power, her son weakens further. His body is twisted, his mind clouded, his fertility doubtful. The dynasty has secured its continuance through her survival, but its future is written in the crooked body of Charles. Mariana's regency becomes a paradox. She governs with skill and tenacity, preserving Spain against collapse, yet all her victories are temporary, all her efforts undone by biology. She holds the empire together while watching its heart rot away in the nursery. Every treaty she signs, every loan she negotiates, every rival she defeats, none of it matters if her son cannot father heirs. And as the 1670s draw to a close, that truth becomes unavoidable. Spain's greatest enemy is not France or England or rebellion. Spain's greatest enemy lies in the twisted body of its king, a child forged by centuries of incest, too weak to stand at the altar of history. And Mariana, veiled in black, must govern in the shadow of that truth. In 1679, Mariana of Austria, now in her mid-40s, arranges his first marriage. The bride is Marie-Louise of Orléans, a French princess, radiant, young, and full of life. She arrives in Madrid like sunlight breaking into a tomb. To the Spanish, she is a symbol of hope, the chance that new blood, fertile and healthy, might repair centuries of damage. But months turn to years, and no heir comes. The court becomes a theatre of desperation. When Marie-Louise dies in 1689, after a decade of humiliating barrenness, Spain mourns publicly, but behind the grief lies relief. A new queen can be chosen, another chance for an heir. Mariana, older now but still sharp, oversees the search. The choice falls upon Maria Anna of Neuburg, a German princess from a fertile family. Her sisters are reputed to have produced dozens of children. She arrives in Madrid with the weight of expectation pressing down like a crown of thorns. If she fails, there will be no salvation for Spain. But Maria Anna finds not a husband but a shadow. Charles is frailer than ever, his body consumed by seizures, his speech slurred, his movements halting. His deformities have deepened with age, his jaw grotesquely enlarged, his teeth misaligned so badly that chewing is agony. The court whispers that his spine curves, that his legs cannot support him unaided, that his mind itself is clouded. Physicians poke, prod, and bleed him, each treatment more desperate than the last. Confessors urge relics, prayers and processions. Nothing helps. By now, Europe no longer believes in Spanish heirs. Ambassadors write home not of possibilities, but of partitions. They describe Charles as already dead, a living corpse whose continued breathing is an inconvenience to continental diplomacy. Behind closed doors, France, Austria, and England draft treaties, dividing Spanish lands like scavengers carving up a carcass. Mariana knows this. She reads the reports, receives the letters, and feels the empire slipping from her grasp. But she refuses surrender. She plays the last card available. Diplomacy. Through coded correspondence with her brother Leopold of Austria, she positions Austria as the natural heir to Spain's legacy. She argues that only another Habsburg can protect Spanish integrity against French conquest. But the irony is bitter. The same bloodline that destroyed Spain's strength is now her only bargaining chip. In the meantime, Charles's condition worsens. The court oscillates between pity and disgust. When he walks, it is with difficulty. When he eats, it is with agony. When he speaks, it is with effort. Yet when he appears in public, the crowds cheer, because to do otherwise would be to admit the truth. Spain has no future. The 1690s bring no miracles. Mariana of Neuburg, despite her fertile bloodline, produces no children. The Spanish court debates endlessly. Is the problem the queen, the king, or divine displeasure? But by now the truth is unavoidable. Charles is infertile, his body too broken to produce heirs. The dynasty is finished. The year is 1696. The Alcazar Palace of Madrid groans under winter winds. Its stones, blackened by centuries of smoke, seem weary, as if the very building feels the exhaustion of a dying empire. Inside, Mariana of Austria lies in her chambers, her body weakened by age and grief, her black silks replaced by the linen sheets of the sick. For more than 30 years she has been widow, regent and guardian of Spain's fragile monarchy. Now at 62, she is dying. Around her hang portraits of children long buried, daughters who never reached womanhood, sons who died in infancy, and one boy who somehow lived, Charles II, the last Habsburg king of Spain. Her death comes at a moment of cruel irony. Across Europe, diplomats prepare for the inevitable. Charles II, sterile and sickly, has no heir. The War of the Spanish Succession looms on the horizon. Mariana does not live to see it. She dies believing her son might yet father an heir, clinging to the faint hope that the dynasty she defended could still survive. Her funeral is vast, a spectacle of black velvet and golden torches winding through Madrid. Crowds line the streets, remembering not the Austrian girl who married her uncle, but the widow who kept their empire intact when collapse seemed certain. The hearse draped in black passes beneath balconies where citizens whisper prayers. To them, she is not foreign, not an intruder. She is Spain's queen mother, the woman who held their world together, however tenuously. She is buried at El Escorial, the vast mausoleum built by Philip II. Mariana was both product and victim of the Habsburg experiment, but also its most skilled practitioner. She outmaneuvered nobles who mocked her as foreign. She withstood coups from Don Juan of Austria. She navigated wars against France, rebellions in Portugal, and bankruptcies that would have destroyed weaker rulers. For decades she preserved Spain's dignity, even as its power dwindled. But none of it could undo what centuries of incest had done. The arithmetic of blood cannot be cheated. Every uncle-niece union, every cousin marriage, every contract that tightened the family vine, added another layer of weakness, another crack in the foundation. After the War of Spanish Succession, the crown passed not to another Habsburg, but to the Bourbons of France. The dynasty that had dominated Europe for 3 centuries ended not with conquest, but with sterility. What, then, is Mariana's legacy? She was called the most inbred queen in European history, and rightly so, yet she was more than her blood. She was a survivor, a strategist, a ruler in an age that despised women in power. She became queen by accident of birth, regent by accident of death, and legend by sheer endurance. History remembers her not only as the woman whose blood carried the Habsburg curse, but also as the queen who held an empire together when it should have shattered. Mariana of Austria was both warning and inspiration, a warning of what happens when power is concentrated too tightly, when dynasties mistake incest for strength, an inspiration that even in impossible circumstances, intelligence and resilience can delay destruction. The arithmetic of blood always balances. In Mariana's lifetime, the numbers still added up, barely. After her death, the equation collapsed. Spain lost not only its dynasty, but also its place as Europe's greatest power. Yet Mariana herself, veiled in black, remains etched into history as the woman who fought against the inevitable and made her doomed life matter.